Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II Here. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider, a priest of the Church of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 170 and we're covering Optatam Totius 21, which is on the continuous formation and the conclusion of Optatam Totius. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we spoke about how pastoral concern should permeate studies and all human means should be used to train seminarians. Today we have a kind of odd paragraph where it has two whole sections. The paragraph is broken by sections, which I don't think I've seen anywhere else in a papal document like this. But we're going to cover all of chapter 7, which is 21a, which is training to be achieved after the course of studies, so continuous education. And then all 21b is going to be the conclusion. The summary is priests need to keep being formed, and this is to penetrate priestly formation along with this document, needs to penetrate priestly formation along with Trent, showing a hermeneutic of continuity. So let's read it. Paragraph A is going to be about formation not ending with ordination, and B is about that hermeneutic of continuity with Trent, and continuing on what this document says in seminaries. And it's going to be pretty brief. So let's read A. Since priestly training, because of the circumstances, particularly of the contemporary society, must be pursued and perfected even after completion of the course of studies in seminaries, it will be the responsibility of episcopal conferences and individual nations to employ suitable means to this end. Such would be pastoral institutes working together with suitably chosen parishes, meetings held at stated times, and appropriate projects whereby the younger clergy be gradually introduced in the priestly life and apostolic activity, under its spiritual, intellectual, and pastoral aspects, and would be able day by day to renew and foster them more effectively. So the basic idea of this paragraph is that priests need ongoing formation. There are a lot of good initiatives. I remember when I was a religious brother, I was working in a diocese, and the diocese had, my mind's going blank on his name, but it had a priest from the National Catholic Bioethics Center come in and give like a one-day seminar on bioethics to try and refresh all the priests' knowledge on this. Because, I, who've doing moral theology and reading up on this, even I, sometimes it's good to have a refresher if I'm not teaching it. Teaching it serves a refresher for me, for all the basics, right? And that's important. Now, I know like a lot of communities will have a week together as a religious community, or they'll have the convocation of the diocese. And there's often a mix there. Oftentimes they'll have somebody doing some kind of ongoing formation there. I know, for example, for us, we'll often have like the liturgy, a course on the liturgy, or a course on some aspect of psychology, or things like that. Other times we'll have things about internal aspects of our community and how we do apostolate and questions like that, which is important too. And we only have so much time in the year, so to meet all together the whole 150 priests in the province, we can only really do a few days a year, like 3-4 days a weekish, right? And also there's a lot of programs now where a lot of dioceses have started out not directly following this, but in practically following the ideas of this paragraph, in starting out mentoring programs for younger priests. So to make sure that they're under a good pastor who's really going to mentor them. Because honestly, if you're a pastor and you have an associate who's in his first 1, 2, 3 years of priesthood, one of the biggest important things you can do as the pastor there is mentor that associate so that he can be a great pastor in the future, because those first few years of priesthood can have so much effect on it. And there is lots of ongoing formation, especially in these early years, because it's super important. We know from other things that something like half of all priests who are going to leave the priesthood do so in the first 5 or 8 years or something like that. So having those means in place to help young priests out is super important for their perseverance, for their greater formation, so they can be better priests, better adapted to the apostolate as time goes on. Because the seminary should produce someone who's relatively good to go into a parish and things like that, but we aren't going to produce a perfect product, a perfect priest. And so there's always that need for continual formation. And sometimes, after being in the parish, a priest should realize that they need this or that specific thing, and they should be encouraged to seek those out in extra classes or extra support groups or things like that. And we need this formation to avoid getting stale, because we can easily get stale in our preaching and things like that. Finally, it talks about the responsibility of this is more local or national. It's not something that the Holy See is going to put in specific norms about. But it is still important. It's not just something that we can do away with and think, okay, every place does it. I think the program of priestly formation with the USCCB has a whole section on it. So now let's move to 21b, which is the concluding paragraph, and it talks about hermeneutic with the Council of Trent and the hermeneutic of continuity with the Council of Trent, and a conclusion making sure that this gets applied to seminaries. So let's read it. B. The fathers of this Holy Synod have pursued the work begun by the Council of Trent. While they confidently entrust to seminary administrators and teachers the task of forming future priests of Christ in the spirit of renewal promoted by the Sacred Synod, they earnestly exhort those who are preparing for priestly ministry to realize that the hope of the Church and the salvation of souls is being committed to them. They urge them also to receive the norms of this decree willingly, and thus to bring forth most abundant fruit which will always remain. So, first of all, two little side points. The hermeneutic of continuity has been mentioned a few times in this podcast, and is really a hermeneutic where you read the various documents of the Church as working with each other, not as disagreeing. We work and we say, look at what's said before Vatican II, after Vatican II, during Vatican II, and how do these work together in a continuous thing of a continuous, constant teaching of Catholicism, not in some kind of rupture or variation. And then Trent was the one that first mandated seminaries. A lot of times before, priests would be formed almost as like an understudy or like an apprentice to the previous parish priest. And that can lead to certain holes in formation, things like that. And so the idea of seminaries was really promoted. Now, a lot of dioceses had seminaries beforehand, but this was really where it was mandated to be systematic for all priests. And then it's talking about how we need to take on Vatican II's renewal. The Church has its hope in seminarians, right? If your diocese has nobody in the seminary, you're not in a good place. You want to have priests, young men in the seminary, because if you're looking at your diocese 10, 20 years down the road, you have to look at the ones in the seminary. Because those guys who are now 24 in the seminary are going to be the 44, 54-year-old priests in 20, 30 years, the ones who are leading the big apostles in the diocese, the big parishes and things like that. And what position are they in right now? We have to look at that with hope, and the seminarians have to realize that they are the hope of the Church in that way. And it asks that these norms be received well, finally. Unfortunately, as you started in that first part with Father Doherty, that wasn't always done, and oftentimes certain things that were explicit here, like, hey, focus on Thomas Aquinas, or these aspects of formation, were just ignored, and certain people in charge of certain seminaries decided they were just going to do whatever they wanted, contrary to what the Church and Vatican II taught. So, thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You can donate to help StarQuest produce it, another great podcast, at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly on the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow we're going to start Gravissimum Educationes, and to do that, we're going to interview an expert in Catholic education. I have this interview scheduled when I'm recording this, but I haven't recorded it, and in case that it doesn't work out with that person, I'm not going to give a name. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information, like playlists and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X. There's also a Discord server at sqpn.com/Discord, and it has a channel for Vatican II in a Year.